address the elephant in the room. I'm the hottest person in the world.
You just can't close your mouth.
Studios really need to go back to what they originally did, which was tell your stars to shut up.
Because you just can't be sane, even when you do open your mouth.
What can be said about this level of narcissism?
Rachel, did Steven Spielberg not pay you for your role in West Side Story? Cry me a river. People have real problems and no one gives a shit if she got paid for 17.
I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress. I deserve to be paid.
Everything will be great once we just act exactly like men.
Who wants a movie about true love?
Theaters are, of course, entirely empty.
1, 2.
Rachel Zegler thought the worst was over. She thought the first South Park parody, mocking her Snow White disaster and turning her into a screeching, out-of-touch cartoon, was the bottom of the humiliation barrel. But insiders say she was dead wrong.
I'm a narcissist.
Other breaking news. Water. Wet.
Rumors started swirling late last night that South Park's writers aren't done with her yet. Sources close to the show claim a second parody targeting Rachel is already in early production, and when Rachel caught wind of it, she reportedly lost it behind closed doors.
She comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat, and that's why people are so annoyed.
According to multiple insiders, Rachel went ballistic after hearing the rumors. Her team allegedly scrambled into emergency mode, with publicists drafting frantic PR strategies and legal advisors begging her to stay calm. But friends close to Rachel say the actress feels personally hunted, that South Park's first roast wasn't just satire, but a full-blown character assassination.
I will elbow everyone out of the way to play the part.
A real team player.
Now, facing whispers of a second brutal takedown, Rachel isn't just devastated, she's furious. She's convinced that if another parody airs, it could cement her as a permanent national punchline, a meme no studio wants to touch. And this time, sources say Rachel isn't planning to sit quietly and take it. Behind the scenes, there's talk that she's exploring options to defend herself, whether through official statements, legal threats, or a media blitz designed to shift the narrative. But here's the catch. Disney executives are allegedly terrified that any public reaction will just pour gasoline on the fire.
Zegler's career now looking like it is seriously on life support.
Their silent strategy after the first South Park episode was a calculated gamble. And now, with new rumors heating up, the internal battle lines are being drawn. Rachel wants to fight back. Disney wants her to disappear. Either way, one thing is clear. The drama isn't over. It's escalating. And Rachel Zegler's Hollywood future might just depend on what happens next. Inside Disney headquarters, the mood shifted from damage control to outright panic the moment whispers of a second South Park parody started circulating.
I was scared of the original cartoon, was terrified of it.
One of the bravest women ever born.
Bob Iger's inner circle, already battered from a year of box office flops and brand controversies, reportedly held an emergency meeting to map out potential fallout scenarios. According to insiders, the verdict was grim. Any public response, any show of anger or outrage would only guarantee that South Park doubled down harder. The studio had learned that lesson the hard way after watching other celebrities try and fail to outmaneuver the animated juggernaut. Their conclusion was brutal but simple. Stay silent, brace for impact, hope Rachel listens. But behind the silence, anxiety was boiling over.
I don't need your business. Thanks.
Disney had bet hundreds of millions on Snow White being a new cornerstone for their live-action empire. Instead, they were now staring at a public relations time bomb they couldn't defuse. Executives reportedly fear that a second parody could completely sink whatever hope remains for salvaging Snow White's box office performance, or even worse, permanently associate Disney's once proud princess brand with mockery and failure. Already, merchandising partners were getting cold feet. Already, ticket pre-sales were softening even further. And now, with the possibility of Rachel's humiliation going viral all over again, studio insiders are allegedly preparing for the worst, a total marketing collapse.
What would you say to those who are just kind of overly critiquing the film at this point? You've worked so hard on it.
I'm getting on across the block here. Yeah, hold on.
All right.
Publicly, Disney maintains a frozen smile. No statements, no interviews, no acknowledgement. But privately, the whispers are ugly. Some executives reportedly blame Rachel for igniting the fire in the first place with her controversial interviews. Others argue Disney's own marketing strategy, pushing a modern, independent Snow White narrative, set her up for failure. Either way, no one inside the castle walls wants to own the disaster now spiraling out of control. And caught in the middle, Rachel Zegler is left dangling, furious and humiliated, while the studio that once crowned her their next princess quietly edges away. If a second South Park episode really hits, and all signs point to yes, Disney's gamble to stay silent might backfire spectacularly. Because if Rachel fights back on her own, the battle won't just be about her anymore. It could drag Disney itself straight into South Park's savage spotlight. The moment rumors of a second South Park parody hit the internet, the reaction was merciless. Memes started flying faster than Rachel Zegler's team could even think about a response.
Take some of this upon yourself. You don't have to grovel. You don't have to beg, but you screwed up. You were given a golden goose opportunity, and that golden goose is belly up. So what do?
Screenshots of Rachel's past interviews were dragged back into circulation, stitched side by side with exaggerated cartoon versions of her woke princess persona. Threads exploded with people joking that South Park didn't even need to exaggerate this time, just copy-paste her real quotes. One viral post read, racking up hundreds of thousands of likes in mere hours. The internet smelled blood in the water, and it went for the kill. Fans who had once defended Rachel's modern interpretation of Snow White now found themselves admitting, sometimes reluctantly, that the satire wasn't entirely unfair. Others, far less sympathetic, gleefully piled on. Hashtags like SnowWoke2 and Rachel Meltdown trended worldwide. New gifs of the cartoon Rachel ranting in a boardroom were being used as reaction memes for everything from bad customer service to political rants. It was brutal. It was relentless. And worst of all for Rachel, it was effective. Every repost, every sarcastic comment, every side-by-side meme was cementing a new public image of Rachel that she couldn't control. It didn't matter how talented she was. It didn't matter how carefully Disney tried to refocus attention on the movie's visuals or Godot's villainous turn. Online, the audience had already made up its mind. Rachel Zegler was no longer seen as the fresh-faced Cinderella story Hollywood had once marketed. She was now the face of a cultural flameout, and if a second parody dropped, that image would be burned in even deeper. Insiders say Rachel's team was horrified watching it unfold in real time. Every strategy they'd planned, to shift focus, to rehabilitate her image, to center the narrative back on Snow White's artistry, crumbled under the weight of sheer internet mockery. And in today's world, where perception is everything, the real damage wasn't just to Rachel's reputation, it was to her future.
I don't know if that mirror was broken, but that has to be one hell of an acting job by Gal Gadot. She looks into the mirror and she says, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And then they show her a picture of Rachel Zegler, and somehow she has to not burst out laughing.
Because once the memes take over, once the internet turns you into a joke, Hollywood rarely sticks around to write you a second chapter. Behind closed doors, Rachel Zegler wasn't just humiliated, she was livid. Sources close to the actress say the moment the rumors of a second South Park parody reached her, she snapped. Friends reportedly described her pacing her apartment for hours, alternating between tears and furious outbursts, railing against the people she believed had abandoned her. And at the top of her list, Disney. The very studio that had once plastered her face across marketing decks and sold her as the future of their live-action empire, was now, in Rachel's view, throwing her to the wolves. Insiders claim Rachel felt betrayed and used, accusing Disney executives of failing to shield her when the backlash first erupted months ago. She allegedly pointed to the company's decision to muzzle her during press tours, canceling interviews, pulling her from magazine shoots, citing scheduling conflicts, as a silent admission that they saw her as a problem, not a princess. One friend claims Rachel vented that Disney had sacrificed her to save the brand, letting her take the full force of the cultural backlash while they slipped into silence. The South Park parody only deepened the wound. In Rachel's mind, according to those close to her, the satire didn't just mock her, it exposed the total absence of support from the studio that had promised to stand by her. She reportedly told friends it felt like Disney handed her a script, pushed her into the spotlight, and then ghosted her the second the tide turned. Words like humiliated, abandoned, and targeted allegedly came up again and again during private conversations. At one point, sources say Rachel floated the idea of setting the record straight herself, going rogue with a statement or even a live video. But her publicists, terrified of adding fuel to the fire, begged her to stay silent. Every instinct Rachel had screamed to fight back. Every advisor warned her that fighting South Park would only make it worse. Trapped between fury and fear, Rachel Zegler now faces the nightmare every rising star dreads, watching her carefully built career spiral out of her control and realizing the people who were supposed to protect her have already moved on. If there was one moment in South Park's savage parody that truly shattered Rachel Zegler's public image, it was the boardroom scene. Cartoon Rachel storms in, snarling at executives, sneering at tradition, and launching into a full-scale meltdown about how dwarfs, love stories, and fairy tales are outdated and oppressive. The satire was ruthless, and the internet instantly knew exactly where it had drawn its inspiration.
We're not all blind, we can still see. Gal Gadot is a beautiful person. And Rachel Zegler is a fairly good-looking person.
Within minutes, fans had stitched side-by-side comparisons of the cartoon's speech and Rachel's real-world interviews. The match was brutal. The cartoon didn't have to exaggerate much. It felt like they had simply animated her actual words, and that's what made it cut so deep. South Park didn't invent a caricature out of thin air. They weaponized Rachel's own public persona against her. They held up a mirror, distorted just enough to make it hilarious, but not so much that audiences couldn't recognize the uncomfortable truth underneath. For Rachel, who had fought to present her Snow White reimagining as empowering and progressive, it was a devastating blow. What she had seen as thoughtful critiques of outdated storytelling were now boiled down to a screeching rant about how fairy tales needed to be fixed. Viewers who had once rolled their eyes at the controversy suddenly understood what all the fuss was about. Those who had defended Rachel's modern take found it harder to argue when the satire looked so close to reality, and those who had criticized her from the beginning, they celebrated the parody like a long overdue public reckoning. Memes flooded social media. Clips from the boardroom scene became reaction GIFs. Even people who had barely followed the Snow White drama were now in on the joke. And the joke was Rachel Zegler. Insiders say Rachel watched the scene in private and completely unraveled, calling it a hit job and a character assassination. But the cold truth is, once South Park targets you, there's no undoing it. No amount of PR spin, no perfectly worded apology, no well-meaning interview can erase the image once it's burned into the culture. For Rachel Zegler, the boardroom meltdown wasn't just a cartoon gag. It was the moment her public narrative cracked wide open, and millions of viewers watched it happen in real time. The ripple effects of South Park's savage parody didn't stop at social media memes. Within 24 hours of the episode airing, industry insiders were already whispering about a chilling new reality. Snow White's box office projections were crashing, and fast. Early estimates, which had already been soft after months of controversy, took a brutal nosedive. Ticketing sites showed a sharp dip in pre-sales. Retailers slashed prices on Snow White merchandise again, desperately trying to move dolls and apparel now linked to what had become a cultural punchline. For Disney executives, the timing couldn't have been worse. The studio had hoped that after the initial backlash cooled, casual audiences would still show up for the glossy visuals and Gal Gadot's villainous turn. Instead, the South Park parody reignited every buried resentment, every old interview, every meme that painted Snow White 2025 as a preachy disaster rather than a magical reimagining.
Because a woman shouldn't have to depend on a man. Snow White was brought back to life by a lady doctor. And she lived happily ever after? Well, she couldn't indulge in strenuous activities like handball, but otherwise, she was fine.
In short, the damage wasn't just online anymore. It was financial. And the fallout wasn't limited to Rachel Zegler. Gal Gadot, who had been relatively untouched by the earlier drama, now faced renewed scrutiny after fans noted her eerie social media silence and subtle likes of posts suggesting celebrities shouldn't feed trolls. That tiny gesture was enough to set off a fresh wave of speculation about tensions between her and Rachel. Meanwhile, Andrew Burnap, cast as Snow White's love interest, watched his potential breakout moment crumble under the avalanche. His character's rumored gutting in reshoots became yet another talking point about how badly Disney had mismanaged the film's messaging. Internally, Disney's marketing team scrambled to shift focus. Insiders say last-minute discussions revolved around recutting new trailers to emphasize visual spectacle and Gadot's performance, downplaying Rachel as much as possible without triggering a public relations firestorm. But even that desperate pivot might not be enough. As one veteran executive reportedly said, "You can't market around a meme. Once the audience starts laughing at you, you're dead." And for Rachel Zegler, the implications were even more devastating. Snow White had been positioned as her launch pad into superstardom, a golden ticket to leading franchises, endorsement deals, prestige roles. Now, instead of celebrating a career-defining moment, she's fighting to keep her professional future from collapsing entirely under the weight of a cartoon roast gone viral. As Snow White's collapse moved from probable to inevitable, Disney's once carefully managed unity shattered behind closed doors. Suddenly, nobody wanted to take ownership of the disaster. Insiders claim an ugly wave of internal finger-pointing erupted across departments. Executives blaming marketing, marketing blaming creative, and more than a few quietly suggesting Rachel Zegler herself had torpedoed the project. The knives were out, and loyalty was nowhere to be found. Some Disney staffers, speaking anonymously, insisted Rachel was just following orders early on. They claim corporate memos directed the cast to emphasize modern leadership and independence from romantic rescue, crafting talking points around Snow White's new image as a girl boss icon. According to those insiders, Rachel didn't go rogue. She amplified what executives had encouraged. Her interviews weren't freelancing. They were over-enthusiastic adherents to the new brand strategy. But other voices within Disney tell a very different story. They allege Rachel took the message far beyond what anyone had intended, turning promotional appearances into lectures, sneering at the 1937 classic instead of celebrating it, and alienating core audiences who simply wanted a faithful update. They argue the memos stressed modernization with respect, not mockery, and that Rachel's unscripted sound bites turned a delicate balancing act into a full-blown PR implosion. Whatever the truth, the result is the same.
What an idiot I've been as a young person in this industry who has no filter and no idea what she's doing.
A studio in quiet chaos. With ticket sales plummeting and Snow White becoming a late-night punchline, executives are allegedly scrambling to distance themselves from the project, even as the marketing clock keeps ticking. Some internal discussions have reportedly floated a stunning possibility: dramatically scaling back Snow White's theatrical release altogether, dumping it onto streaming with minimal fanfare in hopes the controversy dies down faster. As for Rachel, the situation is even bleaker. Once touted internally as the future face of Disney's live-action division, she now faces a brutal reality. Not only is her biggest role tainted, but the very people who once cheered her on are now whispering that she was too difficult, too opinionated, too risky. In Hollywood, those labels stick, and no matter how the official story spins, the behind-the-scenes betrayal has already written its first damning chapter. In the emotional chaos following the first South Park parody and the rising rumors of a second, Rachel Zegler's frustration reportedly boiled over into dangerous territory: legal threats. Insiders claim that at the height of her fury, Rachel's team floated the idea of pursuing a defamation complaint against the show's creators. She allegedly felt so personally attacked, so humiliated, that some on her legal team began quietly exploring whether any line had been crossed. Could they argue malicious intent? Could they claim character assassination disguised as satire? But the reality hit fast and hard. Disney's in-house attorneys, according to whispers, immediately shut the idea down. Satire, no matter how brutal, is ironclad protected speech under U.S. law. South Park had lampooned presidents, religions, corporations, and cultural icons for decades without legal consequence, and Rachel Zegler wasn't going to be the exception. Worse, any lawsuit would have guaranteed one thing: an even bigger media firestorm. Headlines mocking her inability to take a joke, viral segments ridiculing her fragility. The meme machine would have spun out of control, turning a bad situation into a full-blown cultural catastrophe. Advisors reportedly begged Rachel to let it go, to grit her teeth and wait for the news cycle to shift. But friends close to her say she struggled with the idea that her voice had been stolen by a cartoon, reduced to a shrill caricature that stripped all nuance from her real beliefs about representation and empowerment. One insider even claims Rachel accused Disney of cowardice, of failing to defend her not just from bad press, but from what she saw as misogynistic mockery that could permanently damage her standing in Hollywood. But Disney, facing its own survival battle, had no interest in going to war with a comedy institution. Their silence wasn't just strategic, it was self-preservation. And Rachel, caught between her rightful anger and the cold reality of media optics, found herself with no winning move.
Excuse me, your curtain. Please allow me to help.
Help? From you?
I didn't mean to offend. I just thought you should know that
That I should know what? That some privileged white guy thinks his opinion matters? Get over your entitlement. I'm not some damsel in distress waiting for you to ride in on your high horse.
She couldn't sue. She couldn't lash out. She couldn't even publicly explain herself without risking another viral meme. In the ruthless world of entertainment, the lesson was brutal. When the satire machine turns you into a punchline, fighting back doesn't erase the joke. It only makes it louder. As Rachel Zegler's Snow White saga spirals deeper into chaos, a bigger, scarier question is now looming inside Disney's executive suites. Can the studio's entire live-action remake strategy survive this disaster? Because the truth is, the damage isn't isolated to one film anymore. Industry analysts are warning that the backlash around Snow White 2025 and the South Park firestorm amplifying it could permanently alter how audiences view Disney's reimagined classics. What was once a formula for guaranteed billion-dollar hits is suddenly starting to look like a liability. Insiders say Disney executives are already debating drastic shifts behind closed doors. Some argue the company needs to pause high-profile remakes altogether until the Snow White controversy fades from public memory. Others suggest moving forward, but with far stricter marketing controls. No more modernize at any cost narratives. No more messaging that risks alienating nostalgic fans who still adore the originals. Investors, meanwhile, are reportedly furious, grumbling that trust in Disney's brand is eroding every time a beloved story becomes a culture war battlefield. And South Park's savage parody didn't just roast Snow White, it lampooned Disney's entire approach. Corporate executives clutching diversity spreadsheets while box office numbers crater. That image, the cold, brutal satire of a studio more obsessed with optics than storytelling, hit harder than any angry YouTuber rant ever could. It went mainstream. It stuck. And it's exactly the kind of narrative Disney executives have no idea how to undo. Already, cautious whispers suggest that upcoming projects like The Little Mermaid 2, Hercules, and Lilo and Stitch could face internal delays or major retooling. Some insiders even hint that if Snow White's box office crash is as catastrophic as feared, Disney might quietly shelve planned remakes that haven't yet entered production. Public trust, once nearly unshakable, is wobbling, and Hollywood knows better than anyone that once an audience stops believing in the magic, it's almost impossible to win them back. For Rachel Zegler, the stakes are personal. For Disney, the stakes are existential. And as South Park prepares, allegedly, to strike again, the question isn't just whether Rachel can save her career, it's whether Disney can save the very foundation of its modern movie empire. In Hollywood, careers are built on image, and destroyed by it even faster. For Rachel Zegler, the brutal lesson of the past few months is that talent, ambition, and good intentions aren't enough when the internet decides to turn you into a symbol. Once a rising star, now a meme shorthand for corporate overreach, Rachel's future hangs in a dangerous balance. South Park didn't just mock her once, it potentially locked her into a pop culture caricature that could follow her for years, no matter what projects she takes on next. Friends say Rachel still believes time can heal the damage, that if Snow White's craft, the sets, the costumes, the cinematography, can earn some critical praise, the conversation might eventually shift away from her interviews and back to her acting. But in the ruthless economy of memes and mockery, that optimism may be heartbreakingly naive. Most audiences don't read nuanced articles about set design. They remember the viral clip, the boardroom meltdown, the girl boss princess yelling about smashing traditions while box office numbers crashed. And with whispers of a second South Park parody on the horizon, the risk of permanent branding only grows sharper. If Rachel gets roasted again, and if Disney stays silent again, there may be no recovering her image in the eyes of mainstream audiences. Studios will see the baggage, not the potential. Brands will see controversy, not charisma. And casting directors who once fought to sign her may quietly move on to the next safe bet, leaving Rachel fighting to prove she's more than the meme the world decided she would be. The tragedy is, Rachel Zegler has undeniable talent. She burst onto the scene with raw, radiant presence, capturing Spielberg's lens with something rare and real. But Hollywood is an unforgiving town, and the internet even more so. If she wants a second act, it won't be because the industry hands it to her. It'll be because she fights, harder and smarter than ever before, to rewrite the story that's already been written in cartoon ink. So what do you think? Can Rachel Zegler still flip the script and earn a true comeback? Or has the meme machine already decided her fate? And after seeing Disney stumble this hard, do you think audiences will ever trust their live-action remakes again? Make sure you like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because when you're ready to hear what Hollywood really doesn't want you to know, the next video is already waiting for you.